Marcus Thompson fell to his knees before the headstone, his hands trembling as he clutched the printouts that had just shattered his entire world. The woman who had been secretly visiting his deceased son's grave for months turned out to be a professional con artist. 23 years ago, his wife Sarah had lied to him about infertility, lied about needing surrogacy. She simply didn't want to ruin her figure for pregnancy, choosing her modeling career over motherhood. But the most shocking revelation was that the surrogate mother had returned to destroy their family forever. A calculated revenge 23 years in the making. Stay with me, it only gets stranger. You won't believe what really happened. The foggy dawn shrouded Maplewood Cemetery in an ominous haze as Marcus and Sarah Thompson slowly walked along the dew-soaked pathways. 10 months had passed since that devastating day when their 21-year-old son Jacob died in a horrific car accident on Highway 67. A semi-truck with failed brakes had plowed into his vehicle at full speed. The boy never had a chance. If you like it so far, hit the subscribe button to help people find stories like this. Every Thursday, they brought crimson roses to his grave, Jacob's favorite flowers. It was their sacred ritual, the only thread connecting them to their lost son. But today, they would discover something that would turn their lives completely upside down. Approaching the familiar marble headstone, they froze in astonishment. Instead of the wilted red roses they had left a week ago, a luxurious bouquet of white orchids arranged in a heart-shape lay at the memorial. Beside it stood an expensive crystal vase filled with water and a small velvet box. Sarah knelt down, her perfectly applied lipstick trembling. Inside the box was an antique silver locket engraved with the words, "To my dear boy, your M." This was the 5th time in recent weeks that someone had replaced their flowers and left mysterious gifts. First, a silk ribbon in sky blue, exactly the shade of Jacob's eyes. Then a miniature eagle sculpture, though few people knew about their son's passion for bird watching. Next came a vintage book of Robert Frost poetry that Jacob adored reading, though he hid this from friends, considering poetry unmanly. Marcus surveyed the area around the grave. Whoever was doing this clearly knew intimate details about their son's life. Details known only to the closest people. But who could it be? He contacted the cemetery administration, but old caretaker Mr. Williams just shrugged. There were no surveillance cameras on the grounds, and the night guard made rounds only every 3 hours. Anyone could slip in unnoticed. Sarah called all of Jacob's university friends, his girlfriend Madison, his swim coach. Everyone swore they had nothing to do with it. Moreover, most didn't even know such personal details about the deceased. Sarah's mother suggested it might be some secret admirer or classmate who had been in love with Jacob. The theory seemed plausible until the following week when they discovered something at the headstone that made their blood run cold. There lay an old, worn photograph of a newborn baby in a hospital room. On the back, in shaky handwriting, was written, "My boy, first day of life, March 21st, 2004. This was Jacob's birth date, but the photograph hadn't been taken by them. Marcus and Sarah first saw their son only 2 days after birth when they picked him up from the surrogate mother. Who could have taken this picture on the first day? Sarah grabbed the photograph with trembling hands. Her face turned white as chalk. She recognized this hospital room. It was exactly where, 23 years ago, the woman they had paid $50,000 to carry their child had given birth. Linda Harrison, a 32-year-old nurse from a neighboring town, mother of 2 children, who had agreed to become a surrogate due to financial difficulties. The contract was crystal clear. Complete anonymity. No contact after birth. The child goes to the biological parents without any rights from the surrogate mother. Linda signed all the documents and received $50,000. But if this really was her, how did Linda learn about Jacob's death? And why was she violating their agreement after so many years? Marcus couldn't sleep all night, replaying various scenarios in his head. The next day, he made a decision that would fundamentally change their lives. Install a hidden camera near the grave. Sarah was categorically against it. A cemetery is a sacred place. We can't set up surveillance there like some paranoids, she screamed, throwing pillows from the couch. But after an hour-long argument and Marcus's threats to file for divorce, she gave in. They bought a miniature camera with motion sensor and camouflaged it among artificial flowers in a neighboring vase. The recording quality was excellent, and the battery could last 2 weeks. The next Thursday dragged on painfully. Marcus paced nervously around his real estate office, unable to concentrate on work. Sarah canceled a cosmetics advertising photo shoot and spent the whole day at home, drinking half a bottle of wine by lunchtime. When they arrived at the cemetery to retrieve the camera, their hearts pounded wildly. At the grave awaited a new surprise. A bouquet of rare black roses that cost at least $200, and an elegant silver chain with an angel pendant. Marcus extracted the camera from its hiding place with shaking hands. "Let's go home," he whispered. "Time to learn the truth." At home, they locked themselves in the bedroom and turned on the computer. Marcus fast-forwarded through several days of empty recordings until he reached Tuesday at 2 in the morning. A blurry figure in a dark coat appeared on screen. The woman cautiously approached the grave, constantly looking around. In her hands, she held those same black roses and a small box. When she bent toward the headstone, moonlight illuminated her face. Sarah let out a piercing scream and fell back onto the bed. Marcus felt the ground disappear from under his feet. Even after 23 years, they instantly recognized this woman. Linda Harrison, the surrogate mother of their son. But she looked completely different from 23 years ago. Back then, she was a simple nurse in cheap secondhand clothes. Now on screen was an elegant woman in an expensive designer coat, with professional styling and manicure. On her hand gleamed a diamond ring worth at least $15,000. The recording showed Linda carefully arranging the roses, wiping the headstone with soft suede cloth, and placing the angel chain. Then she knelt directly on the wet ground, not caring about her expensive coat, and began talking to the grave. Marcus turned up the volume, but couldn't make out the words. Linda was crying, occasionally touching the cold marble with her hand. After half an hour, she stood up, kissed her fingertips, and pressed them to Jacob's name on the headstone. Sarah jumped from the bed and began pacing the room like a caged animal. "How dare she? She has no rights. We paid her money. She signed away all claims. Jacob was our son, only ours." Marcus remained silent, not taking his eyes off the screen. Something about Linda's behavior troubled him. This didn't seem like a random display of maternal feelings. The woman knew too much about their son. 2 expensive gifts for a simple nurse. The next day, he hired private investigator Rick Stone, a former police officer with 30 years of experience. A week later, Rick brought a dossier that made Marcus's head spin. Linda Harrison no longer worked as a nurse. 12 years ago, she married Richard Blackwell, owner of a restaurant chain whose fortune was estimated at $22 million. Now she lived in a mansion worth $3 million and was chairman of a charitable foundation helping orphan children. But the most shocking thing was different. In the last 7 years, Linda had regularly made large donations to the university where Jacob studied. She sponsored a scholarship for students studying ornithology, exactly the field their son was passionate about. She knew about his hobby. Marcus showed the report to Sarah, her face contorted with rage. "She was stalking our son. 23 years she violated the contract and spied on Jacob." But the private investigator had discovered even more disturbing facts. Linda didn't just watch Jacob from afar. In her home office hung a photograph of their son's graduation class. Only one person was circled with red marker, Jacob. Moreover, her phone contained a folder with hundreds of photos of their son, downloaded from social media over the past 7 years. Photos of his swimming competition victories, prom, first day at university, vacations with friends. Rick also found out that Linda had been at Jacob's funeral. She stood at the very back of the cemetery, behind a large oak tree, in black glasses and a headscarf. No one noticed her among the hundreds of grieving students and teachers. Marcus felt rage boiling inside him. This woman had secretly been present in their son's life for 2 decades, violating all possible boundaries and agreements. But why? What did she want to gain? He decided to meet Linda face to face and demand explanations. Sarah was against direct confrontation, But Marcus could no longer tolerate this uncertainty. The following Tuesday, they hid near the cemetery in a rental car, waiting for Linda to appear. At 2 in the morning, she arrived in a white Mercedes of the latest model. In her hands were a bouquet of white lilies and a small gift box. Marcus waited until she reached the grave and got out of the car. Sarah remained in the vehicle clutching pepper spray. Linda was bent over the headstone when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a man she hadn't seen in 23 years but recognized instantly. "Marcus?" she whispered, and the bouquet fell from her hands. "What are you doing here, Linda? Why are you violating our agreement?" She straightened up, and he saw that the years hadn't been kind to her. Despite expensive clothes and makeup, her eyes held deep pain that no cosmetic procedures could hide. I just wanted to say goodbye to him. When I saw the obituary in the newspaper, my heart nearly stopped. My boy, our boy. He's not your boy. You were just an incubator. We paid you money, you gave birth and handed over the child. That's where it ended. Linda stepped back, but fire flashed in her eyes. An incubator? 9 months I carried him under my heart. I felt every kick, every movement. When he was born, the first thing he heard was my heartbeat. That gives you no rights. You signed away all claims. And what are these games with gifts? How did you know about his hobbies? Linda lowered her head. Several seconds of silence passed, broken only by the wind in the tree crowns. I never stopped thinking about him. Every day, every hour. It's not difficult to find information about a person online if you really want to. You stalked my son for 23 years. You're sick. This is called harassment. I never approached him, never tried to contact him. I just wanted to know that he was okay, that he was happy, that he was growing up healthy and strong. At that moment, Sarah got out of the car. She could no longer sit aside while this woman defiled their son's memory with her presence. How dare you? How dare you come here and pretend you have some connection to Jacob? You sold him for money. Linda looked at Sarah, and something in her gaze changed. Sadness was replaced by something else, determination or even defiance. Sold? Interesting choice of words, Sarah. Very interesting. What do you mean? Marcus sensed trouble. Linda took an envelope from her purse and handed it to Marcus. I think you should read this. Especially you, Marcus. Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were several documents and an old photograph. He recognized the picture. It was that same hospital photo of newborn Jacob they had found at the grave. But when he turned the photo over, he saw not only the birth date. There was something else written that made his world collapse. Jacob Blackwell Harrison. DNA test results attached. With shaking hands, he unfolded the attached document. It was a genetic analysis result conducted 23 years ago. An analysis he had never known about. Biological father, unknown. Biological mother, Linda Marie Harrison. Marcus felt the ground disappear from under his feet. This couldn't be true. They had used his sperm for artificial insemination. Jacob was their biological son. What does this mean? What kind of DNA test? He whispered, showing the document with a trembling hand. Linda looked at Sarah, who had turned white as death. Ask your wife, Marcus. Ask her why she insisted the fertilization procedure be performed at her friend's private clinic, not at the hospital. Ask why she was so eager to sign the surrogacy contract. Marcus slowly turned to Sarah. Her face was white as chalk, her lips trembling. Sarah? What is she talking about? I can explain everything. It's not what you think. Here's what I think, Linda interrupted. 23 years ago, your wife lied to you about her infertility. She could have children but didn't want to ruin her figure for pregnancy. Her modeling career was more important than motherhood. Marcus froze. Is this true, Sarah? Sarah stepped back, her eyes darting between her husband and Linda. Marcus, please, listen to me. But that's not all, Linda continued mercilessly. Your wife didn't just lie about infertility. I have documents proving even more shocking things. But I'll tell you about that later. Marcus's world completely collapsed. 23 years he had lived in a lie created by his own wife. But what else was Sarah hiding? What documents did Linda have? Why did you do this? He whispered, looking at Sarah. Sarah burst into tears. I was scared. Scared that if the child looked like you, everyone would understand I didn't give birth. My agent said if modeling agencies found out about pregnancy, my career would be over. You destroyed my life for your career? You deprived me of the chance to have biological children? But you loved Jacob. He was your son in every other sense. Sarah tried to justify herself. Linda stepped forward. And now the most interesting part, Marcus. Do you want to know why I married Richard Blackwell? Marcus remained silent, still not recovered from the previous revelations. Because 12 years ago I learned the truth. I learned that Jacob was my biological son, and the son of my future husband. We met by chance when I came to the clinic for medical documents for another matter. An old nurse mistakenly showed me files that should have been destroyed. She took another photograph from her purse. It showed her, Richard, and a little girl about 9 years old. Meet Sophie, Richard's daughter from his previous marriage. Jacob's half-sister. And this is us last Christmas. Jacob's real family. Marcus looked at the photograph of the happy family and felt something die inside him. All these years he thought Jacob was his blood, his legacy. But it turned out the boy had a real family he never even suspected. We wanted to tell him the truth when he became an adult. We wanted to introduce him to Sophie, give him a choice, whether he wanted to know his biological family. But then that terrible accident happened. Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. Marcus stood among the graves, holding the ruins of his former life in his hands. Everything he had believed in for 23 years turned out to be a lie. His wife had betrayed him in the most vile way. And as for Jacob, Linda hinted at some documents but didn't show them. What else was she hiding? Now do you understand why I come here? I have every reason to consider Jacob connected to me. I carried him 9 months, and your wife lied to all of us. Sarah suddenly became angry. But we raised him. We fed him, clothed him, took him to doctors, taught him about life. We were his real parents. Linda turned to her with contempt. Real parents? You who lied to your husband for your own ambitions. Marcus couldn't take it anymore. Stop. Enough. He's dead. What difference does it make now who his biological parents were? Jacob is dead. The words echoed across the night cemetery. In the silence that followed, only their heavy breathing could be heard. Linda slowly approached the headstone and placed her hand on the cold marble. Yes, he's dead. But I am his mother, and I have the right to mourn my son as I see fit. 23 years I remained silent, respecting your boundaries. But now that he's gone. She didn't finish, but the meaning was clear. Marcus felt something break inside him. Not just from the revealed truth, but from realizing he had lost the right to call Jacob his son. If the boy had real biological parents who loved him from afar, then who was he? What do you want from us? What are you trying to achieve? Linda turned to him. In the moonlight, her face seemed ghostly pale. I want the truth to be written on the headstone. I want it to say, Jacob Blackwell Harrison, beloved son of Richard and Linda, brother of Sophie. I want the world to know who he really was. Sarah hissed like an angry cat. Never. We won't let you rewrite history. Jacob was Jacob Anderson, and that's how he'll remain forever. We'll see, Linda replied coldly. I have all the documents confirming my rights as the biological mother. And you, Sarah, only have fake infertility certificates and forged artificial insemination documents. Marcus realized the situation was spiraling out of control. If Linda sued, their entire life would be exposed to public scrutiny. The scandal would destroy not only his marriage but also his reputation, career, everything he had built over the years. Wait, he said, raising his hand. Let's try to resolve this civilly. Maybe we can find a compromise? Linda smirked. A compromise? 23 years I made compromises. I stayed silent when I wanted to scream. I stood aside when I wanted to hug my son. Now the time for compromises is over. She took out her phone and showed them the screen. A voice recorder app was open, and the red recording button had been blinking for half an hour. Our entire conversation is recorded, including Sarah's admission that she lied about infertility. I think journalists would be very interested to hear this story. Sarah clutched her heart. You wouldn't dare. This would destroy my career. Your career? Linda laughed bitterly. And my life? 23 years of pain you caused me? 23 years when I couldn't hug my son? Marcus felt the ground disappearing from under his feet. If this recording reached the press, the scandal would be monstrous. His real estate firm would lose all clients. Sarah's career would indeed be over. And Jacob's memory would be tarnished by this dirty story. What do you want? Money? We can pay. Money? Linda looked at him with contempt. My husband is worth $22 million. I don't need money. I need justice. What justice? Jacob is dead. He's gone. But his memory remains. And I won't let it belong to a woman who lied for her own benefit. Linda approached Sarah closer. In the moonlight, her eyes gleamed like a predator's. You know what's most amusing, Sarah? All these years you thought you were so clever, so cunning. You thought you had fooled everyone. But you forgot one small detail. What detail? Medical archives. The clinic still stores all documents about the procedure, including video recordings of how you instructed doctors to use donor sperm instead of your husband's sperm. How you forced them to forge documents about your supposed infertility. Sarah turned even paler. That can't be. It's been 23 years. Dr. Miller recently died of cancer. Before his death, he gave his lawyer all compromising materials with instructions to publish them if anything happened to his former patients, especially those who forced him to violate medical ethics. Marcus felt nauseous, so not only Linda knew the truth. There were other people, other documents, other evidence of Sarah's lies. Did you specifically marry Richard to get revenge on us? He asked. Linda shook her head. No, Marcus. I married him because I fell in love. And because only next to him did I feel a connection to our son. Richard also didn't know for a long time that Jacob was his biological child. We learned about it at the same time. She took another photograph from her purse. It showed a handsome man about 52 with a teenage girl. Marcus was horrified to notice that the girl looked very much like Jacob at the same age. This is Sophie now. She's 18. 3 years ago we told her about the brother she would never meet. She was furious that we hid the truth from her. She demanded to meet Jacob immediately. Linda fell silent, and tears streamed down her cheeks. We planned to tell him everything on his 22nd birthday. We wanted to give him a choice, whether he wanted to know his biological family. Sophie was preparing a gift for him, a photo album of our family so he could see where he came from. Marcus imagined this meeting and felt sharp pain. How would Jacob have reacted learning he had real parents and a sister? Would he have been happy or disappointed? Would he have blamed Marcus for hiding the truth from him? But now that will never happen. Sophie will never meet her brother. And Jacob will never know he had a family that always loved him. Sarah suddenly exploded. Enough of this melodrama. You want money, name the amount. You want public apologies. You'll get them. But I won't let you rewrite the history of my son's life. Your son. Linda turned to her with such fury that Sarah stepped back. Yours? You didn't even give birth to him. 9 months he grew in me. I felt every kick, every movement. I gave birth to him in agony, and then gave him to you because I believed it would be better for him. And it was better. We gave him a wonderful life, built on lies. He didn't even know who he really was. Marcus could no longer bear these screams. Stop, both of you. Jacob is dead, and we can't change anything. But the women didn't hear him. 23 years of accumulated pain and rage burst out, and it was impossible to stop this flow. You stole 23 years of my son's life from me, Linda screamed. 23 years when I could have been near him, and you stole his normal childhood. Sarah snapped back. If he had known the truth, he would have suffered his whole life with questions. Why we gave him away, why we didn't want to raise him ourselves. We wanted to, God, how we wanted to, but we were young and poor. Richard was still studying. I was working for pennies. We thought with rich people he would have more opportunities. And we gave them to him. Gave? Private schools and expensive toys? And love? Real maternal love? I loved him more than life. You loved the idea of a perfect son. Handsome, smart, successful. But did you know him as a person? This question hit the mark. Sarah fell silent, and something heavy and unpleasant hung in the silence. Marcus realized Linda was right. Sarah indeed loved Jacob, but as a beautiful decoration of her perfect life. She was proud of his achievements, posted photos on social media, bragged to friends. But did she know what their son dreamed of? What he feared? What really worried him? Jacob planned to drop out of university. He wanted to become a wildlife photographer. He had been saving money for a trip to Africa for a whole year. But he was afraid to tell you because he knew you would be against it. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. They really knew nothing about these plans. How do you know this? Sarah whispered. Because I read his blog. An anonymous photography blog he maintained under a pseudonym. There he wrote about his dreams, fears, future plans. Things he couldn't tell you. Linda took out her phone and showed them the screen. It displayed a blog page with hundreds of nature photographs and long texts about travel. The last entry was made a week before the accident. He wrote about how hard it was to live in others' expectations, how he wanted to be himself but was afraid to disappoint people who loved him. Marcus read several lines and felt his heart compress with pain. His son had been suffering, tormented, but preferred to remain silent so as not to upset his parents. He was going to tell you about his plans on his 22nd birthday. 3 months remained until the accident. Sarah collapsed to the ground right by the grave. Her beautiful designer dress got dirty in the mud. But she didn't care. She sobbed, realizing that in 23 years she had never truly known her own son. Marcus stood nearby, feeling like a stranger in this cemetery. A stranger by the grave of a boy he considered his son. A stranger next to a woman who turned out to be capable of such vileness. A stranger in his own life which turned out to be one big lie. What happens now? What are you going to do with this recording? Linda put the phone back in her purse. That depends on you. I'm ready to keep your secrets, but on one condition. What condition? I want to take Jacob's body and rebury him in our family plot, next to the graves of Richard's grandfather and grandmother, where representatives of the Blackwell family should rest. Sarah raised her head, her face red with tears and rage. Never. I'd rather die than let you steal my son's body. Your son? Linda bent down to her. You have no legal rights to him. You're not the biological mother. Marcus isn't the biological father. From a legal standpoint, you're nobody. Marcus realized she was right. If Linda sued with evidence of biological relationship, they wouldn't have a chance. The law was on the side of blood relatives. But we raised him. We were his family for 23 years. Based on forged documents and deception. The court won't consider that. Linda stood up and brushed off her coat. You have 1 week to make a decision. Either you voluntarily agree to reburial or I go to court and make this whole story public. She headed toward her car but stopped halfway and turned around. And one more thing, Sarah. I know about your financial problems, about credit card debts, overdue mortgage payments, about the modeling agency terminating your contract due to age. If you try to interfere with me, I'll make sure no agency in the country will hire you. Sarah paled. How did Linda know about their financial troubles? Marcus had carefully hidden from everyone that his business was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Sarah had indeed lost her job 6 months ago. How do you? Private investigators are useful, especially when you have money to hire the best. Linda got in her car and drove away, leaving them alone among the graves. Marcus and Sarah stood in silence for a long time, comprehending the scale of the catastrophe that had befallen their lives. "What are we going to do?" "She'll destroy us," Sarah whispered. Marcus didn't answer. He looked at Jacob's headstone and thought that he no longer had the right to call this boy his son. 23 years of love, care, pride. All of it turned out to be built on lies. But the most terrible thing was different. Somewhere in a big house lived a girl named Sophie who had lost a brother without ever meeting him. And this loss was also the result of Sarah's lies. The next day Marcus came to the office but couldn't concentrate on work. He constantly thought about Linda's words, about the recording of their conversation, about their life hanging by a thread. During lunch break, he went to private investigator Rick Stone and asked him to find as much information as possible about the Blackwell family. If they were facing war, he wanted to know who he was fighting. Rick brought the results the next day. Richard Blackwell's dossier was impressive. Son of ordinary teachers, he had made his way in life himself, created a restaurant chain, became a millionaire. An exemplary family man, philanthropist, respected member of society. But the most interesting was Sophie's dossier. The girl studied at a prestigious private school, was passionate about photography just like Jacob. Moreover, the school newspaper had published her nature photographs that strikingly resembled Jacob's style. Marcus realized that genetics was an amazing thing. Brother and sister who had never met developed in the same direction, had the same talents and interests. Rick also found out that Linda wasn't lying about financial capabilities. The Blackwell family could indeed afford the best lawyers, and they had connections in the highest echelons of power. "If they sue, you won't have a chance," Rick said honestly. "Biological relationship plus money for good lawyers. That's a guaranteed victory." Marcus returned home and found Sarah in the bedroom. She was lying on the bed with a bottle of wine, crying while looking at Jacob's photographs. "We have to agree," he said quietly. "We have no choice." Sarah turned to him, and he saw such hatred in her eyes that he had never noticed before. "You're giving up? Just like that? Without a fight?" "What fight? We lost 23 years ago when you decided to lie to me. I did it for us, for our future. You did it for yourself, and now we're paying for your lies." Sarah got up from the bed, swaying from alcohol. "You know what, Marcus? Maybe it's better this way. Maybe let this witch take her precious little boy, and we'll start a new life." "A new life? After this whole story becomes public? After everyone learns you lied for 23 years? We'll move to another city. I'll change my appearance, you'll find a new job. People forget scandals." Marcus looked at his wife and realized he no longer knew this person. Sarah had always been selfish, but he hadn't imagined what she was capable of to achieve her goals. "And what about Jacob's memory? Don't you care that he'll be reburied?" "He's dead, Marcus. Dead. What difference does it make where his bones rot?" Marcus felt something finally break inside him. To hear such words about the son he loved more than life. "Get out," he said quietly. "Get out of this house right now." "What?" "I said get out. I don't want to see you anymore." Sarah tried to object, but saw her husband's expression and understood the jokes were over. She quickly packed her things and left for her sisters. Marcus remained alone in the house full of memories of Jacob. He wandered through the rooms, thinking that now he would lose this too. The house would have to be sold to pay off debts. And the memories. What would remain of memories when it turned out they were all based on lies? The next day he called Linda and said they agreed to reburial. He heard not triumph but sadness in her voice. "I know how hard this is for you, Marcus. But it's right. Jacob should rest next to his family. He was my family for 23 years. And I'll never diminish your role in his life. You were a good father to him. But now it's time to let go." The reburial procedure went quietly, without unnecessary publicity. Linda kept her promise, no journalists, no scandals. Only the Blackwell family, a priest, and undertakers. Marcus stood aside and watched as they lowered the coffin with Jacob's body into a new grave. Next to him cried a teenage girl, Sophie, who had finally met her brother, but too late. Richard Blackwell approached Marcus after the ceremony. I want you to know, I don't hold any grudge against you. You're not to blame for what happened 23 years ago, and Jacob loved you as a father. Marcus nodded, unable to say a word. If you want, you can come here. This place will be open to everyone who loved Jacob. But Marcus knew he wouldn't come. It was too painful to watch a stranger's family mourn the boy he considered his son. A month later, he sold the house and moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. The real estate firm went bankrupt. Clients fled as soon as rumors about the Anderson family's problems began spreading. Sarah filed for divorce and moved to Los Angeles, where she tried to revive her modeling career. But she was too old for runways, and the story with Jacob, despite attempts to hide it, still leaked to the press. Marcus got a job as a car salesman and tried not to think about the past. But every night he dreamed of Jacob, a little boy who called him daddy and believed they were a real family. Once, 6 months after the reburial, he couldn't stand it and went to the new cemetery. Jacob's grave was drowning in flowers. Nearby stood a bench where Sophie sat with a camera. The girl looked up and recognized him. Are you Jacob's dad? The one who raised him? Marcus nodded. Mom told me about you. She said you loved my brother very much. Yes, more than anything in the world. Sophie was silent, studying him. Would you like to see his photographs? The ones he took for his blog? She handed him a tablet with hundreds of images. Marcus scrolled through them and couldn't believe his eyes. Jacob's talent was astounding. Each photograph told a whole story, was full of emotion and beauty. He dreamed of becoming like Ansel Adams, photographing wildlife. I want to be a photographer too. I think it runs in our family. Marcus felt sharp pain. This talent, these dreams. All of it was part of Jacob's real personality, which he never got to know. Why didn't you come to the funeral? The girl suddenly asked. Mom said you had the right to be there. I didn't know I had that right. Of course you did. You were his dad for 23 years. That doesn't just disappear. From a child's lips, Marcus heard what he couldn't tell himself. Yes, he wasn't Jacob's biological father. Yes, their relationship was built on lies. But the love was real. The care was real. And 23 years of shared life couldn't simply be erased. You know what? Sophie said, putting away the tablet. I think Jacob had 2 dads. One gave him life and the other taught him how to live. And both are important. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. This wise girl had said what he couldn't figure out himself. Come here whenever you want, she added. I'm often here. I tell my brother about school, friends, what's happening in the world. I think he'd be glad to hear your stories too. Marcus nodded, unable to say a word. When Sophie left, he remained alone by the grave. For the first time in 6 months, he spoke to Jacob. Forgive me, son. Forgive me for not knowing the truth. Forgive me for not being able to protect you from lies. But no, my love for you was real. Every day, every hour of those 23 years. He placed his hand on the cold marble of the headstone, where it now read, Jacob Blackwell Harrison, beloved son, brother, friend. And for the first time in long months, Marcus felt something resembling peace. Jacob had finally found his place, next to the biological family that loved him from afar. And the memory of 23 years of happiness would remain with him forever, despite any lies. The truth had been cruel, but it had also become liberation. Now he knew who his son really was. A talented, dreamy, kind boy who deserved honesty from those he loved. And perhaps somewhere out there, in another world, Jacob had finally met his sister Sophie and learned the truth about where he came from and who his real family was. But the story didn't end there. A year after the reburial, a new shock burst into Marcus's life that turned everything upside down and made him doubt that the truth had already been revealed. It all began with a phone call at 3 in the morning. Marcus was sleeping in his small apartment when a piercing ring woke him. On the other end of the line, a woman was crying. Mr. Thompson? This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell from St. Mary's Hospital. Can you come immediately? There's a dying woman here who's asking to meet with you. She says she has information about Jacob Thompson. Marcus went cold. Who is it? She identified herself as Jennifer Coleman. She says she worked as a nurse at Dr. Miller's clinic 23 years ago. Marcus dressed in 2 minutes and rushed to the hospital. In the intensive care unit, a thin woman about 57 lay on the bed. Her face was yellow from liver disease, and her eyes burned with feverish gleam. Are you Marcus Thompson, the father of the boy who died in the accident? Yes. What did you want to tell me? Jennifer coughed up blood but continued speaking. I'm dying. Liver cancer, final stage. And I can't take this secret to my grave. What Linda Harrison told you. That's not the whole truth. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What do you mean? 23 years ago, I worked at Dr. Miller's clinic. I was there when the artificial insemination procedure was performed for your wife. And I know what really happened. The woman asked for water and continued with a trembling voice. Your wife really did lie about infertility. That's true. But she also lied about the donor sperm. How so? Actually, your sperm was used, Mr. Thompson. Yours. Linda Harrison deceived you. Jacob was your biological son. The world spun around Marcus. That's impossible. She has documents, DNA test results. Fake. All fake. Jennifer grabbed his hand with surprising strength for a dying person. Linda Harrison isn't just a surrogate mother. She's a professional con artist. What? Her real name is Linda Harris. 27 years ago, she was arrested for credit card fraud. Then for document forgery. After her release, she changed her surname and began specializing in deceiving wealthy families. Jennifer coughed again, and blood flowed down her lips. The scheme is simple. She becomes a surrogate mother for rich couples, gives birth to their children, then returns years later with demands for money or property. She threatens scandals, lawsuits, exposures. Most families prefer to pay to avoid publicity. But with you, she decided to go further. When your son died, she saw an opportunity to get more than just money. She wanted to destroy your family out of revenge. Revenge? For what? Because you were the only ones who refused to pay her 23 years ago. Remember? When she tried to contact you 7 years after Jacob's birth. Marcus strained his memory. Indeed, when Jacob was 7, some woman had called them trying to get money, claiming she had rights to the child. But their lawyer quickly dealt with the situation, and the calls stopped. That was her. Yes, and then she swore revenge. 23 years she waited for the right moment. Marcus felt clarity dawning in his head. But the DNA documents. Fake. Ordered from an underground laboratory. Linda paid huge amounts of money to create convincing forgeries. And that man, Richard Blackwell. What about him? He doesn't know the truth. Linda deceived him too. She told him Jacob was his biological son. Showed him the same fake documents. The poor man sincerely believed he had a son he never knew. Marcus grabbed his head. So Richard Blackwell was also a victim of Linda's deception. He sincerely believed Jacob was his son, suffered from never knowing him. And the girl, Sophie? She's really Richard's daughter from his first marriage, but not Jacob's sister. Linda used her as an additional argument in her scheme. She made the poor child believe she had a brother. Jennifer weakened but continued speaking ever quieter. I have proof. In my house safe. Real medical documents, recordings of Linda's conversations with underground laboratories, correspondence with other victims of her scams. She gave him the address and safe code. Why did you stay silent for 23 years? Marcus asked. Because I was afraid. Linda threatened to kill me if I spoke. She has connections in the criminal world. But now I'm dying, and I have nothing to lose. Jennifer closed her eyes. Stop her, Mr. Thompson. Stop her before she destroys someone else's life. An hour later she died, taking with her 23 years of guilt for her silence. Marcus, in shock, drove to the given address. In an old house in a poor part of town, he found a safe with documents that turned the entire story upside down. There were authentic medical records proving that his sperm was indeed used for artificial insemination. There were recordings of Linda's phone conversations with underground laboratories where she ordered fake DNA test results. There were documents about her other victims, wealthy families across the country she had been deceiving for years. The most shocking was a letter Linda had written to her accomplice 5 years ago. In it, she described in detail her revenge plan against the Thompson family. How she would wait for their son's death to deliver the final blow. How she would destroy their marriage, take the child's body, and make them a laughingstock. Marcus read this letter and felt rage boiling inside him. This woman had planned the destruction of his life as cold revenge for his once refusing to pay her. But the worst was yet to come. The last document spoke of Linda's plan to use Sophie for the final blow. The girl didn't know Jacob wasn't her brother, but Linda planned to tell her the truth at the cruelest moment. After the girl had grown attached to her brother's memory, Marcus realized he had to act immediately. Sophie was in danger, Richard was deceived, and he himself had lost his son because of someone else's revenge. He called private investigator Rick Stone and gave him all the documents. Rick studied them and whistled. "My God, Marcus, this woman is a real monster. We need to contact the police immediately. First, I want to talk to Richard. He should know the truth." The next day, Marcus drove to the Blackwell house. It was a luxurious mansion in a prestigious district, but now Marcus knew this family's wealth was built on lies and deception. Richard met him warily. After a year since the reburial, they hadn't communicated once. "Mr. Thompson, what brings you here?" "I need to tell you something about Jacob, and about your wife." They went into the study, where Marcus laid out all the documents on the table. Richard read them, and his face gradually paled. "This can't be true. Linda couldn't. She loved Jacob like a son. She used your feelings, Richard, and mine, and your daughter's feelings." At that moment, Sophie entered the study. The girl looked upset. "Dad, where's Mom? I can't find her anywhere." And all her things disappeared from the bedroom. Richard and Marcus exchanged glances. Linda had fled. Apparently, she realized the truth might come out. "Sophie, sit down," Richard said with a trembling voice. "I need to tell you something about Jacob." The next hour became the most difficult in this family's life. Richard explained to his daughter that Jacob wasn't her brother, that they had been living in deception all this time. The girl cried, unable to believe that the woman she considered her mother could so cruelly deceive them. "But I loved him like a brother. I told him at the grave about school, friends, and he wasn't even my brother." Marcus approached her and hugged her. "Sophie, your love was real, and I'm sure that wherever Jacob is, he felt it. But it's all lies. Our whole family is lies." "No," Richard said, embracing his daughter. "My love for you is real. And what we experienced together this year is also real. Linda deceived us, but she couldn't deceive our feelings." At that moment, Richard's phone rang. His lawyer was calling. "Mr. Blackwell, I have bad news. Your wife has emptied all bank accounts and disappeared. It looks like she planned this in advance." Richard closed his eyes. "How much did she take?" "About $10 million. Everything she had access to." Marcus felt his heart clench. Linda hadn't just destroyed their families emotionally. She had also robbed Richard. "There's something else. Police report they found documents about other victims of your wife. It seems she deceived dozens of families across the country." After the conversation with the lawyer, Richard sat in silence for a long time. Then he looked at Marcus. "What do we do now?" "Fight. Find her. Seek justice." "And Jacob? His body?" Marcus thought for several seconds. "Sophie is right. Your love for him was real, even if based on lies. Let him stay here next to people who sincerely loved him." Sophie raised her tear-stained eyes. "But he's not my brother." "Sophie," Marcus said gently, "family isn't just blood. It's love, care, memory. You loved Jacob as a brother for a whole year. That love didn't become less because you're not related." Richard nodded. "Marcus is right. And I suggest we remain a family. Not biological, but real. We all lost because of Linda, but we can support each other. Marcus looked at these people. A wealthy businessman who had lost millions and illusions about his wife, and a teenage girl who learned her family was built on lies. And he understood they had truly become his family. Not by blood, but through shared pain and mutual support. In the following months, they worked together with police, trying to find Linda. It turned out she had gone to South America, where she bought a new identity and was hiding from justice. But the most important thing happened not in police stations, but in their daily lives. Marcus helped Richard restore his business after the financial blow. Richard helped Marcus open a new real estate firm. Sophie often came to Marcus, and he taught her what he had once taught Jacob, to value life's simple joys. They regularly visited Jacob's grave. Now it was a place where three people met, united not by lies but by the truth that love is stronger than deception. A year later came news. Linda had been arrested in Brazil. She had tried to pull the same scheme with a local wealthy family, but Brazilian police proved more attentive to international searches. Extradition took 6 months. When Linda was finally brought to the United States, Marcus, Richard, and Sophie came to court. Linda looked completely different. Expensive outfits were replaced by prison uniform, professional makeup was gone, and there was no trace in her eyes of the confidence with which she had once threatened them at the cemetery. The trial lasted 3 months. It turned out Linda had deceived more than 60 families over 23 years of criminal activity. Total damages exceeded $120 million. Most terrible were testimonies from other victims. Families destroyed by her lies. Children who grew up thinking they knew their parents, then learned the truth. Marriages broken by her intrigues. When it came time for victim statements, Marcus stood and looked Linda in the eyes. "You didn't just steal money and peace from me. You stole the last year of my son's life. A year when I could have told him the truth about how much I loved him. A year when we could have grown closer instead of living in fear of disappointing each other." Linda lowered her head, but Marcus continued. "But you couldn't steal the most important thing. You couldn't steal my love for my son. And you couldn't prevent us from finding a new family in the chaos you created." He pointed to Richard and Sophie sitting nearby. "We became a family not because we share blood, but because we share values. Honesty, love, mutual support. Something you never had." The sentence was harsh. 27 years in prison without possibility of parole. Linda heard it with a stone face, but when they led her away, Marcus saw fear in her eyes. After the trial, the three of them went to Jacob's grave. Sophie brought new photographs, pictures she had taken over the past year. Photos of their new family, their shared holidays, their trips together. "You know," she said, arranging the photos by the headstone, "I think Jacob would be glad we found each other, even if we're not blood relatives." Marcus put his hand on the girl's shoulder. "We're relatives by choice, Sophie, and that's sometimes stronger than blood." Richard nodded. "Jacob united us, even after death. Maybe that was the meaning of everything that happened." As they left the cemetery, Marcus glanced back at the grave one last time. The headstone still read Jacob Blackwell Harrison, but now it didn't cause him pain. The surname didn't matter. What mattered was that the boy was loved by 3 people who found each other through shared loss. Linda had wanted to destroy their lives with revenge, but instead created new bonds. Her lies ultimately led them to truth, the truth that real family is built not on documents and genetics, but on love and loyalty. And somewhere in a prison cell, a woman who thought she could play with others' lives finally understood the price of her games. 27 years of solitude, fair payment for 23 years of destroyed families and stolen happiness. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to It Happened to Me. A new story drops daily.